Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Brian. Today is an exciting day, my favorite day as I say every year. We are taking a look at the brand new Four Roses limited edition. I want to start off by thanking Bourbon Pursuit. This is not my sample. They had a sample of it. They've already done their whiskey quickie with it. They let me try this one so I can get a video out for you guys. You know that every year I look forward to trying the Four Roses LE. I try and get a bottle of it. This year they've already announced how they're going to be releasing it at the distillery, and there's a lottery for their Mellow Moments members. So check all that stuff out on their socials or on their website about how that's distributed. But I've had a couple of friends in the media already getting samples of this and starting to chatter, and it's got me anticipating what are we going to be tasting. So I've actually broken down some facts about this blend or other things historically as it comes to the Four Roses LE. I'm going to get into all that first, and then we're going to taste this whiskey. How's that sound? While I have you here, jump down below, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Let me know what your favorite Four Roses LE has been. I'll also start by saying I did an early tasting of this with Zach from Bourbon Kingdom, and I have another video of us. You might see some overlap with some of the things that I say. You might get some new information in one of the two videos that I didn't talk about in one or the other. So that is also another thing. It might release before this video just to kind of get a teaser out there. We tasted through this and compared it to a couple others that I'll also compare here on the video. So let's talk about what the breakdown of this is. Now you'll probably see I've got some infographics that are coming up over here, and that will kind of lay down some of the recipes. The 2024 version of the Four Roses limited edition small batch is coming in at 108.2 proof. We have 31% of a 12-year OBSV mash bill. We have 23% of a 15-year-old OESK mash bill. 39% of a 16-year-old OESF mash bill, and 7% of a 20-year OBSV. If you haven't already, I have plenty of content about Four Roses, how to read a barrel, how to understand their mash bills, their yeast strains, all that stuff, in other videos that I have here on the channel under my 7th tier playlist. So feel free to check out any other Four Roses content. I don't think you'll find somebody who talks about Four Roses on YouTube as much as I do. Probably unhealthy. I'm going to put a breakdown below so you can jump straight to the review if you do not want to hear about this breakdown, but I found it really interesting as I was going through some history, breaking down recipes, how it compares to some older releases that we've seen so far and what we might expect here. Let's dive into some facts that I had here as I was doing some research from the LEs, all the way back to the 2008 release of the Mirage, however you say it, correct me down in the comments below. I was told by my buddy Steve Berman's Bourbon, give him a follow if you haven't already, that in a call that they did with Brent Elliott, they had mentioned that they did 20 different variations of recipes in preparation for this year's LE, and that this is the one that was selected. Very interesting in their breakdown. This is the first year we have OESF in a Four Roses limited edition. Oh shoot, I almost said a flub. It is not the only one with OESF. The first one with OESF was the 2022 release, so just a couple years ago, and it had 14-year OESF in that one. So yeah, it is the second one to have OESF in there. I'll also mention, if you remember from the channel I've probably talked about, a couple of years back, there was a run of OESFs, HW55. These were in the 12, almost to 13 years old, and so it's been a couple years. It could include something like that here in the recipe. We'll find out if it comes through on the palate at all. It was a very unique run because of its slight smokiness, little like barrel char intensity, like you might notice in like Kelvin char barrels or something like that, mixed with a lot of good oak and leather. So in my head, I'm automatically thinking, is it anything to do with those OESFs? No idea. We'll find out as we talk through it. This is the first time in the last 8 years that there has not been OESV in the recipe. I think because of my love for OESV, I just kind of assumed maybe that was the anchor point for a lot. And I guess in the last several years it has been, but there's some other recipes that seem to anchor a little bit more we'll talk about. We also know from past releases like the Visitor Center release that with this having 20-year OBSV in there, older aged OBSVs can come off very sweet and fruity and creamy and sweet, and so it could present itself like an OESV, so maybe it just wasn't needed with two components in this recipe being OBSV. It does, however, continue with OESK being in the mash bill, which it has been in every limited edition small batch release except for the 2015 and the 2009 Marriage release. You could also say the same thing for OBSV. That has been featured in every limited edition except for 2011, 2017, and that 2009 marriage bottle. Funny enough, it was OBSV and OESK that were the only two components in the very first version, the 2008 marriage bottle, that was their first limited edition. So the harmony of those two recipes has a long-standing history, at least on paper, with Four Roses and their limited edition small batch. The 2018 does skew a little bit younger in its overall age, but shares a lot of similarities if you consider that the rye content percentage, or like the E and B flipping, whether it's the 20% or the 35% mash bill, isn't expressed solely how you might assume. So a high rye barrel might seem more lower rye in flavor, a lower rye barrel might seem more spicy in flavor. Like if you ignore all that stuff and just go based on yeast, it has some similarities with the 2018. And the same could be said about the 2017 Al Young limited release as well. Both of these two releases, so the 2018 and the 2017 Al Young, have OBSF in them. And the only other bottle that has the OBSF in it, so only 3 releases in history, that's the 2014 as well. So there's only 3 bottles that include OBSF. Spec breakdown, I might generally think, hey, this could be close to 1/30th. It could be close to the 2017 Al Young. The Al Young does have a very old component. I do not think we're going to find a similar flavor profile to that. Going back to the 2022 breakdown, so it had 14-year OESF, it had 14-year OESV, 15-year OESK, and 20-year OBSV. So also kind of a similar pocket of breakdown as this one in a little bit of a way. So we'll see, the 2018 and the 2022 both also have, some similarities you could draw. I guess any of them, you could stretch however you want to, but we'll probably revisit these later. This is only the 4th small batch limited edition with a barrel that's over 20 years old. The 5th, if you consider the Al Young. Without further ado, let's jump into this pour. Oh man. So first drip on the nose, it does lean a little bright, maybe a little bit citrusy, in slightly youthful, unbalanced in that way. Again, this is first drip on the nose. I highly recommend even 5 minutes opening. This nose is going to change significantly. I was told by a couple other folks that it does improve a lot with airtime. I actually have a glass already poured over here that's been aging a little bit longer that we're going to revisit too. But I will say, even giving 5 minutes of airtime to this nose, you're going to notice a significant amount of change, a decrease in that brightness, and just a lot of nice plethora of fruits and stuff start to come in. There's a creamy brown sugar here. There's honey. There's a little bit of fig as well. I could probably say there's a little bit of smokiness to this. And I don't mean that in terms of a really big smoky way. I mean that, like I mentioned maybe previously, if you think about maybe a Kelvin Char barrel, or just if you think of a well-seasoned barrel and a hefty amount of seasoning, that's the kind of a presence you get kind of buried a little bit more in depth on the nose here, but it's very subtle. I feel like the brightness starts to change maybe to like the notes that you would get on like a freshly opened can of like orange juice concentrate. There's a little bit of maraschino cherry juice, so it's not very luscious, dark, syrupy like Luxardo. It's a little bit more like the sweeter, just maraschino cherries. I feel like I often lean when it comes to Four Roses to raspberry, powdered sugar and raspberry more specifically, and I don't get that as much here. Honestly, I feel like the fruitiness on here surprised me a little bit. It's a little bit tropical. I could see like maybe a touch of pineapple in here as well. It's not crazy. It's not overly, done or anything like that. I think you just have a really nice structured Four Roses, but there's nothing crazy about this on the nose. Let's dive in here on the palate. Man, the palate makes me think of something very different than some other roses profiles. I think the first thing I lean towards, I normally say raspberry, powdered sugar, like these are very classic notes I tend to pull out in a lot of roses. And this has a lot of fruitiness, but it makes me think of like black raspberry chip ice cream. It makes me think of candied strawberry. There's even a note that tastes like dried pineapple a little bit. It's not overly tropical. Think dry pineapple, think maraschino cherry syrup, think strawberry candy. Yeah, it leans on the palate with that big kind of candied fruit note. Almost makes me think MGP more than it does roses, but it does quickly transition to a very roses-like background. You get the oak and the leather really draw out significantly here. That said, it is not very drying like maybe the 135th has been. I think the 135th has a lot of really good flavors, but it does have a little bit more drying sensation. This here, I feel like it is not crazy complex, but it does have good layers to it, and maybe one of the more balanced pours of the Roses limited edition that I've had in a while. Let me go real quickly to this glass that's been sitting, and I'll start to compare it with some other LEs. Oh, the sweetness is like so much more intense on the nose after it's sat. You get more honey, you get more of the brown sugar syrup, you get more concentrated fruit notes as well. It is very juicy, satiating, inviting. Let's dive on the palate of that one. It opens up really, really well. It just lets all the flavor marry really, really well together. I wouldn't say it necessarily presents any newer flavors, but they just have a lot more harmony the longer it sits. Back to my notes I mentioned at the very, very beginning, and thinking that it had some similarities to the 2018, which was the 130th. Let's go ahead and pour a little bit of that to compare, because I actually think that that's more truer than I would have realized. I liked the 130th when it first came out. It had this glazed donut note. It had those nice kind of powdered sugar raspberry notes. I feel like as it opened in the bottle, it did lose a little bit of, its best qualities from fresh pop. And I don't feel like a lot of people talk about that with Roses all that much, but it sagged a little bit, but then kind of stayed right where it's at. You have a bottle like the 135th, I feel like it kept getting better. You have a bottle like the Al Young, and it is great fresh pop, and then actually does get really, really flat. I feel like continuing to come back to it if you do that over like a long period of time. This 130th, I feel like still has a lot of very creamy, honey, sweet notes on it. Honey bun, like notes to it, underlying fruit notes. It's like a softer version of some of the things that you would get in the new 2024 release. Let's go ahead and jump at the palate of this one. Yeah, there's not a lot to complain about with the 130th. And this is again from 2018. My bottle's been open since then, so it's been open a long time, but it is very balanced. It's very nuanced. If anything, I think I wish that it had a little bit more oak presence, but if you are wanting to find a really middle-of-the-road kind of balanced drinking 4-Rose LE of recent years, it is one of the better examples of that. And I think that the 2024 LE does a lot of what the 130th had, but with a little bit more and with a little bit more age to it. Oh yeah, just going back to the nose on the 2024, more elegant sweetness, more cooked caramel notes, more buttery, creamy, buttercream frosting notes. Like everything is just a little bit more intense, a little bit deeper, really enjoyable. The 2022 I could compare to. The 2022, it has these pops of orange there. It's actually more barrel charry. It's darker. It has these darker fruits that have subdued since the bottle's been open. And with time, if you check my other review, you'll hear me kind of sum up more detailed notes about that. But it was very spice driven initially. It had a lot of that K come through. It had a lot of heavy, dark tone notes. And in a lot of this barrel char, I feel like it had a lot of oak presence as well. And while the 2024 does have a lot of good oak presence, like I've just mentioned all along, it is more balanced, it has more harmony. It actually does have a fair amount of similarities. I feel like the spice and the citrus isn't really a focus in the 2024 like it was so much in 2022. The 2020 was a weird outlier. I think Fred Minnick was the best one to review that and talk about it because it was very, very spice driven. I normally don't lean towards that, especially in Roses, but there's a characteristic about it that I just love so much that it is very unique compared to other Roses, but there's still things I really, really enjoy about that. The best thing that I can say about this, I really enjoy this, but not for the same reasons that I feel like I like some of the others. 2019 was a modern dusting a bottle, very unique. 135th had a lot of similar things like that. And for all intents and purposes, if you compare it to the 135th is just ramped up. The nose is more intense. The palate is more intense. But this 2024 is a good marriage between some of the oak and fruit that you get out of the 135th, but more of the balance and way it presents itself to the 130th. It's a good marriage of the two of those profiles. The 2021, I don't have here to compare it to. I don't even know that I'd want to. It had some Q in there, and from tasting a lot of OBSQs, I just felt like it stuck out a little bit more, and there were single barrels in that year that I preferred a little bit more. So no real reason to go wax poetic comparing to those. I think the better comparisons are with the 130th and the 135th, which you already heard me describe. I would probably say that while all three super unique, of the last since 2019, I think the 135th probably is still my favorite of those. I think that 2020, depending on your level of appreciation of spice and how that's nuanced, could go above or below this 2024 for you. If you want a little bit more balanced, sweet profile, a lot of things still to kind of pull out and to discover, especially these kind of perfumey, interesting notes that continue to draw out the more you sit with it, then I can see this 2024 outpacing the 2020 for you guys. But in my particular perspective, I think that this easily is better than the 2021. It's easily better than the 2022. Let's go ahead and jump back to the 2024 and finish up the review. I feel like the longer you sit with it, you get these, again, these kind of Kelvin-like notes, this toasted marshmallow, well-charred barrel, oaky leather, tobacco-y influence. It's a little bit fragrant. It's a little bit perfumed. It's not quite as much as the 135th or the 2019, but that layering is there. The more you sit with it, I highly encourage you give it some time because they're really beautiful notes that start to show themselves with some time. And for that reason, I feel like it gets close to some of the elements. It's like a junior version of 135th. There's a lot of things to love about this one. It just doesn't have the dark notes that you notice heavily in the 135th, but as you sit with it, they start to show themselves a little bit more, but never quite to the intensity that they're in the 135th. Again, not for the reasons that I might like the 2019 or the 135th. I do really enjoy this release. I feel like it's a more subdued pour, but there's a lot to pull out. It's very enjoyable to sit with and has all the flavors that you like about Four Roses, yet still brings some unique flavors to the table. It's interesting because I think aside from 135th's unique character, it did well for a lot of people last year, and I think because of those reasons. But generally, when I hear people talk about roses, I feel like they fail in blinds with people because they just don't perform compared to other pours. The fact that this 2024 has characteristics that remind me of MGP, and I feel like MGP products generally score favorably in blinds and in head-to-heads with people, at least products that are made with those. I think that this one, aside from it being a little soft and proof, has the ability to go against a lot of people's, end of year lists and still end up doing favorably. I feel like the only thing I could probably say about it is that this 108.2 proof, if it had maybe a little bit more oomph to it, could it strike a richer chord? Could it fight a little bit harder as it compares to some of these other products? Hard to say. It's hard to say unless I put this against things at the end of the year and see how it comes out. A really enjoyable bottle, very, very balanced, very elegant, nuanced, yet still bringing some interesting things to the table compared to the other Four Roses LE. That is my wrap-up of the 2024 limited edition. Guys, thanks so much for tuning into another video. I know this one was a little bit long. My Four Roses ones generally are. I love bringing Four Roses information to you all and breaking it down. There's another video I have where I taste through this initial impressions with Zach. You can watch that one if you want something a little bit more casual, a little less cut up. If you want to check out other Roses content, please do that with some other videos on the 7th tier playlist. And let me know if there's other things you want to hear me talk about. We are getting towards the end of the year. We should have some exciting releases. Hopefully I'll get a chance to try them. Thanks so much for tuning into another video, guys. Hope it was insightful, informational. And until next time, we'll see you all later.